neighbors, even the building next to the Boys and Girls Club. And the materials are, let me make a pause here for a second.
While you're pausing, I'll just say that my initial reaction personally is, except for the bank across the street, everything around there is masonry. And we've got a full metal glass skin on this that does not fit into the context from my perspective at this point. That's my initial read. I have no problem with colors. I have no problems with the glass, really. I just have problems with the material on the skin.
And I'd like to make a very similar comment. I'm glad to see it opened up. I'm glad to see all the glass. I actually like that a lot better than what we've got right now. But the metal panels, especially adjacent to this historic building, does bother me. And I'd much rather see masonry on that face. And it is facing the park, and across the park are historic buildings, and at the end of the park, historic buildings. And this really does not complement the historic buildings, in my mind.
I mean, it's a tough situation. It's a non-conforming building. That said, materials are important. Other comments?
First of all, I have to admit that my firm was responsible for this building.
I figured this moment might come today.
Although I didn't have much to do with it, I distinctly remember there was a doctor's office, and right up front, I don't want any windows. I kind of like the treatment. If anything bothers me at all, and I'm not concerned about the lack of masonry, frankly. I think the red color is a little forceful, but
I like it.
I don't have a big problem with it. And I kind of like this approach. Certainly in need of something.
We certainly need something.
Sam Seeley built that building.
I don't have a problem necessarily with the color. I don't have a problem with some metal panels. But I don't know if you want to go with a cementatious panel to get some masonry on there on the light color. I don't know.
I think in spite of the reservations about the material, I'm very impressed with the change in the appearance of the facade.
Well said.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Lisa?
No, I agree. I think that this happened a couple of weeks ago, too, with another project. I think we really need to be cognizant of materials in the context of the neighborhood as much as we can.
If I could continue, and again, sure. First of all, I agree with all the comments that are made, and the creative nature of transitioning this building to a useful building. My concerns are material and contextual. This is rendered as a contemporary solution. I am sorry to see, although it's more of a zoning issue than ours, the loss of the first floor, or the use of the first floor for visible parking. I wish there were no cars on that facade and that it was all part of the public realm in a commercial space. If there was any way, part of the guidelines of the city of Syracuse is to improve the quality of the public realm, and essentially mixed use is talking about commercial active pedestrian space at the first floor, not to be used for parking. If this were on the other side of the building or at the south end of the building where you came in from McCarthy and went into the building, it would be, in my view, a much better public realm issue. So I would speak against the visibility and access of parking along the public realm on a significant corner. And these are architectural issues that we are making these comments to the zoning because we don't control this. We're asked to give opinion. And historically, I agree with the comment about a masonry context. Even though this is a very well done scheme, a full glass or a metal panel building to me is not contextually appropriate. It's interesting because your red panels are being used obviously in a very mixed palette and contemporary use where you have a range of colors like brick, three colors, right. Much like the, what's the Franklin Street. They use the
okay.
three colored
Yeah.
panels to represent the historical context. That makes it a contemporary building, which is fine. I'm just wondering if you can be a better neighbor in the historic sense with a contemporary design by using more of a reference to traditional materials with a contemporary rendering. In other words, your building basically is a contemporary building, but could be rendered in more traditional materials, such as a cementitious panel or a brick veneer panel for the brick to render that. I think, and that comment is probably adequate.
May I ask for clarification in terms of cementitious panel?
Yeah.
What type of?
Well, I think you could, as long as the appearance was cementitious, I suppose you could use a metal panel with a textured paint. In other words, I think it's the appearance, even though I would love, historically, it would be better to have some real material there, such as a brick or a brick veneer. That would be the most appropriate. And in terms of cementitious panel, it could be a masonry board as opposed to a block. The cement paneling could be rendered in a contemporary way, even by having ashlar stacking of horizontal panels to represent the tradition of masonry. So I am concerned with the modern rendering here, but that's more interpretive to the architectural intent. And the last thing I wanted to say is that this is a corner building, significant corner building, and the two vertical elements, which I believe are the entrances, both on State Street and on Genesee Street. Townsend, sorry. The building could have been rendered with a corner element coming down to grade at the corner, creating more of, again, a full commercial zone. So it could have been interpreted with your two vertical elements at the corner to strengthen that corner in a historically traditional way. Just to make my point, you could have taken the entire corner and rendered it in some kind of a red brick material to be complement to the church kitty corner. And the rest of the building could have kind of snuck in behind that. Yeah.
The existing corner, that's the existing corner condition. So you have the slender steel post coming down to the ground.
Yeah, right.
And there's no heavy element coming all the way
Right.
to the ground.
Yeah, no, you're right, it's open. You're absolutely right. It's an open contemporary building.
Which I think is a significant comment in terms of the change to masonry, because if the building came to the ground and did not have this open appearance at the corner, then the change to masonry as a material would make more sense to me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a very good point. In fact, I'll tell you that contemporary facade in your upper left-hand picture of your 4 pictures, which is the park facade of a large solid wall and a vertical glass at the corner, is pretty strong contemporary. That's a very modernist simplification of the 50s through 70s architecture. That's a strong design element, and it's not being used in your new scheme. But I agree with Dan's point that the openness and transparency along, and that big solid wall, which was huge, was a very modern building. At the time, that was the goal.
So in terms of that, the location of the red kind of accent
Yep.
to entrances, and I guess in response to the parking as well, we located the parking along Townsend because it is not a heavily pedestrian access area, and what we did was we minimized the amount of impact that the first parking space has to the Genesee Street side.
Right.
So all of our commercial space does face the Genesee Street end, and we tried to push the parking as far back as we could to not impact the pedestrian activity along Genesee Street. And then we relocated the red into, I guess, to the right side instead of to that corner, again, because the front door to those tenants is actually located on that side. So locating kind of, this is the entrance from a massing standpoint, when the door is going to be 40 feet away, kind of away from that corner. We wanted to keep pedestrians along Genesee Street and kind of push them to where they should be going, instead of allowing for more pedestrian access down the street. So it was reflective of both pedestrian activity and vehicular activity that we should make that shift.
Is McCarthy Street two-way or one-way?
One way,
So
yeah.
going from west to east.
Right.
With heavily monitored parking permits,
Yeah, right.
especially by the judges.
Yeah.
When we did the,
They
when
currently
we,
have twice as many cars as we're, 3 times as many cars
Yeah,
as we're
as
showing
you're
in our
gonna need,
plans
yeah.
there now. Yeah.
when we did the Justice Center, years ago, the judges fighting for those parking spaces was a bad scene.
I'm just wondering if you wanted to give voice to the material of most of the buildings around. I'm just wondering if your red panels could be brick.
That's certainly a possibility.
And I'm wondering, if you look at the masses of that would speak to it. And, I understand what Dan is saying, and I don't disagree at all. This is a tough one.
I think just to go along that line, complimenting the neighboring Boys and Girls Club a little more than your rendering showing it might be a big help to the whole building. In other words, softening the degree of brightness and color of the two materials, keeping the concept of what you got, but softening them to belong a little bit, to set in better next to its neighbors, could be a huge step in the right direction. Some subtlety in the color choices. I think, again, we're all excited about your project.
We love corner. It's great.
I was going to make one other technical comment. You could actually, as far as your public space, you could pull your glass space on Genesee Street further to those columns without hurting your project's concept and solving a public space problem. You don't want deep niches off of city streets. You could even take it to the back side of those columns. Dan, you might disagree, but I mean, you could push that, and conceptually, I think would fit your concept.
We initially had that. The difficulty became the foundation work that has to happen in the basement in that area.
To change it.
Yeah, to change that. Okay. We tried to maximize the amount of
Leasable space, yeah.
pushing it out, but it got pushed back in a later phase.
Okay. What, is there any discussion, what is the material of this full sidewalk treatment? Is it just going to be concrete? So what is our comment?
Well, we made a bunch.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's going from unattractive to a lot better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think
Definitely.
everybody supports,
Yeah.
in
and
general.
I do like the way you have set off the
Yes.
2 entries. I think
Right.
that's very well done. I would like to see it in a masonry instead of metal.
It could be that the 2 setbacks could be done in a color closer to the Boys and Girls Club if you felt that was appropriate. And they would be a little more...
So our comment is we're in support of the project overall. We think it's well done. There is some comment on the board that we'd like to see some sort of masonry treatment. It's not, unanimous. Some of the board thinks this is fine.
Let me just add, let me try and clarify that one point. What about the issue of metal panels? Do we want to say that metal panels are not appropriate? Do we want to say that...
What does the board want?
We feel that masonry would be more appropriate.
Right.
How is that?
Well, it's again, we're trying to give specific guidelines to the zoning or planning commission.
Well, it's actually to the applicant. We give the comments back to zoning that gives them to the applicant.
Right.
And then it's up to the applicant to
up to the
decide whether or not.
The applicant comes back to zoning to make their final
either
presentation with the
yeah.
issues on the table.
So would it be correct that we're not going to comment in the absolute negative about the metal panels? The majority of the board would prefer some reading, some masonry reading. Is that accurate?
And let me make a clarification further, is that
Wait. Is that okay with your comment? That we're not going to...
Yeah, and masonry in the broad expanse, it could be a masonry textured panel.
that's what I was trying to clarify.
Okay.
That it could be a metal panel textured like masonry. It doesn't want to look like a bright, shiny metal panel.
Correct.
I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let's put that.
I had a question about
Sure.
the accuracy of the color, whether which renderings are the most accurate, whether
Yeah, I haven't seen
what is not red is closer to white or closer to light brown.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part?
What looks in this rendering like brown.
Yes.
Is that the more accurate color, or is it going to be closer to white?
The latest renderings on the table right now are a little more intense than what the actual color is. It's a little more saturated than what the actual color is.
Because I like it.
It's going to be a little darker, so it's going to be a little more not as vibrant of a red. Exactly.
Right.
So it'll be tone, like you're turning down the tone button a little bit,
Less intense color.
less intense.
On that, I see a gradation of color. Is that still the intent?
Yes, so there's 3 panel colors, and all we're doing is we're staggering them at different
Right.
intervals so
Right.
that it allows for that gradient look.
Right.
But it's just 3 solid panels. Every horizontal panel is one.
And it is going to be less bright than
Yes,
this?
yes, less vibrant.
Right.
There's a lot of design talent in this. What I'm questioning is, even in this example of the gradation of the red, the concept's great of a gradation, but it's done in a totally contemporary fabric way as opposed to a traditional masonry way. That's what concerns me. Again, I think it would be a project understood better if it had a more historic complement to the reference space they're in.
The State Tower building, starts dark, goes up.
Exactly. It's a grand old technique, you know. It's even on masonry rendering, rough at the base and light at the top.
But we do want to compliment you overall. Absolutely. What's the, is this a firm project now?
Yes.
And what's the start date?
By the end of the year, so in the next couple of months, hopefully they're hitting the ground. It's
So-
all interior, with mostly interior work to
Right.
begin with, so they can work through the winter.
Right.
Yeah, they can get that done.
Right.
I love the name. I knew Patrick Corbett. He was a good friend of the family. He's a good family, obviously.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
It's, so there is a piece of public art
There
that
is.
was constructed for this building. It's underneath the overhang there. Is there any plan for that? That will be going away?
So our first floor plan does not impact our artwork. It could stay there, but the owner is also open, and I was gonna have a side discussion with you afterwards.
no, that's
That
fine.
if someone were to want to relocate that piece, we
Okay.
would be willing to allow for that to happen.
All right, yeah, there was a move afoot before, so.
So
maybe we-
there's no funding that he'd be able to put towards, actually moving it, but the rights to it or access to it.
I have another quick question. The residents come in through Townsend Street entrance, there's no elevator at the Genesee, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We separated the commercial
Right.
use from the
One last question, is the Corbett Corners going to be lit?
This should be backlit.
It will be backlit. So it's going to be backlit letter by letter?
Yes, there'll be individual channels.
Offset letter with backlit.
And then the shield for
Right. That's a nice touch.
Yeah, it is.
That's a nice touch.
Wow. Who's the owner of the building, if I could ask?
the icon, Desires,
Yeah.
Gracias Desires.
Grazie.
They did the Excelis building, turned it into Icon Tower.
Okay, good.
Harbor Freight, all that.
Okay, thank you.
They're active guys. All right, thank you very much.
Good luck with your project. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so if everybody's got some time, let's enter into some discussion along the lines that Kate was saying.
Yeah, and
Kate, do you want to set
actually
the stage a little bit? And we will not talk about the current application on the
Current
table.
application. That-
Let's one point.
Which one is that?
Kate,
Well, we can.
I'm sorry.
Just want to ask.
So the question is whether or not we want to close the meeting or
I think it should just be part of the meeting.
part of the meeting. So that's fine.
If it's part of the meeting, we could discuss the
That's true.
current application.
That's true, too.
You can do that as well.
That's very good.
But I did want to just bring up one other quick item, and that is that the local protected site application for 429 North State Street, the Angeloro building is moving forward and will come before the Planning Commission. There'll be a public hearing on October the 7th. So I will be at that
Planning
meeting. That will be Planning Commission, and then if all goes well, it will go in front of Common Council. So
And just a recommendation that we should be part of both of those meetings and help Kate present this, not just,
Is there going to be a study session with the Common Council on this?
I am hoping to that will happen, or in fact even a public hearing. There may even be because we need to have an opportunity.
Keep the board members informed as to a study
Absolutely.
session, public hearing.
Public hearing. Yep.
yeah, we'd like to be part of that to help the new planning commission, the new members of the Common Council and everyone reviewing this, of our methods and
Yeah.
the
Oh, and
skills
which-
that we represent to bring forward as policy, as a comment.
I'm also, I've also put in a request to have a committee meeting of neighborhood preservation, which is chaired by Councilor Allen,
Right.
to have a general discussion about the Landmark Preservation Board and bring them up to date with the comprehensive survey, which, by the way, we're wrapping up the first stage and which is the north side. Maybe at the next meeting I'll come back with the results of what they found, but it's actually kind of exciting. Shotwell Park is a potential district that they've identified and given us a leg up on, and there are about 40 other properties that they have identified as eligible for the National Register. In addition to the ones that are already on the national or already eligible or listed. So we'll be moving on to phase 2, which will be parts of the south side, parts of the west side, which will be phase 2 of the comprehensive reconnaissance level survey.
Okay.
So things are moving along, but so there are a couple things to discuss with the Common Council, and this will be hopefully we'll be able to have that committee meeting before 429 comes before Common Council. So
Okay.
all right. So we don't have anywhere in our guidelines, the guidelines that were written up for Sedgwick or Berkeley, or actually in our ordinance about how, not that it necessarily would be in the ordinance, but we don't have anything in the guidelines about how we treat, how we review non-contributing structures. So I did a little bit of research, and again, Ithaca always seems to rise to the top as the community that seems to have its act together. And I did find, so they do have, guidelines that they've written out, general guidelines for how their board looks at, it's actually an excellent resource that I think that we may want to borrow parts of it. And this was their guidance in terms of non-contributing structures.
And I think this is pretty close in line to what we have done historically. I would say that over the years, their statement in their, what you just passed out, talks about, however, proposed alterations to a non-contributing structure are evaluated solely for their impact on adjacent historic properties and the historic environment as a whole. The alteration may not increase the incompatibility of non-conforming structures. We have tended to expound on that a little bit and talk about scale, color, and material also, which they don't specifically say, but I think it's almost implied.
In terms of how that impacts the scale,
Correct.
color, and so forth. And the other thing I think that is interesting is that here, this is a non-contributing building here. We have had over the years a number of applications that have come in for buildings that it is actually solely because of the age of the property. And that's certainly the case in Sedgwick. I looked through the document, everything that we have, and it looks as though the end date, the period of significance for Sedgwick apparently is 1850 to 1930. And so there are a number of sort of 50s and 60s buildings. The application
It's a 50s
for
building.
is actually it's a little earlier. It's like 1940. One of the problems, or what would be interesting is if we could expand that period of significance so that we could loop some additional properties in with also then the purpose of being able to make the tax credits available to those property owners. We'd have to work with the State Preservation Office on that, but a lot of these houses, they fit perfectly within the context. They're just not the right age.
That doesn't seem to be,
Consistent.
to me, the right guideline.
If the point is, if the age is a newer building, but it matches the characteristics of the historic, would it be included?
Then I wouldn't call it a non-contributing.
Right.
Well, that's what I mean, is that I don't know that I think that when the Sedgwick was developed, the Sedgwick district, Sedgwick Highland James district, for Sedgwick Farms itself, they were looking at, specifically when was this laid out, when were these properties, when were the majority of the properties constructed. And the majority were constructed by 1930. But now we're that many years on, and we have houses that are really good infill. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it seems
So-
the age is a lot less important than the appearance of the building itself.
Right. I mean, that's what we're trying to sort out.
But given the current situation, my question for the board is how, what I have always thought our review of non-contributing, or your review rather, of non-contributing buildings would be in terms of this, that how does it impact the rest of the district, and that it's not a fine-grained approach to what's happened. What we've allowed, the board has allowed fairly extensive alterations to non-contributing buildings with review, but it has been less stringent, and I think that's also, is that in here?
The proposed alteration may not increase the incompatibility.
Right. And in fact, I was just listening, what do we care about for these newer buildings, that they basically don't cause, that they would complement, or they would be considered under impact of form, materials, or color to the historic district. Most of the questions we would get on color or change, or a material change, or a form change, such as a deck or an addition. And any of those three, you would want to not be, as it says here, increase the incompatibility,
Right.
Which is a great term. We certainly don't want to increase it, but we could, through any application, support the district with recommendations towards form, materials, and color.
But here's the question, and I mean, it does obviously relate to the application that's coming. So you have a house that has a porch, and they want to replace it with a new porch that is, just supposing it's a side porch, the front porch, that they want to replace it, but they are, and it's going to be the same footprint, but it's going to be different. It's going to be different.
Style or character.
It's a different style, different character, but it is nonetheless within keeping. There's nothing much change. However, materials are changing, or there's, it is. It seems to me that as long as it is a non-contributing building, that the level of review is lighter.
Well, how does that impact the rest of the district?
How does it impact the
I mean,
rest of the
it
district?
seems to me to create tremendous inconsistencies and difficulty for the board to make recommendations. And I think it creates, confusion within the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I think that this term here that Ithaca uses, it does not increase the incompatibility. It's got a broad range of interpretation there that should work for such examples as you just stated.
Yeah.
That the board, let's say it's a totally contemporary porch or an addition that would be stand out in the neighborhood if it was built, that would be, it would increase the incompatibility with the neighborhood,
Right,
and you wouldn't want that
absolutely.
for that case.
I think this is actually a good way to look at it, and applies, in my mind, not only to non-contributing, but also to the contributing.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
That's the strength of it, really.
I think that for the contributing buildings, it also comes down to that retention of original material.
Right.
That
Right.
perhaps we're not, the board is not quite as concerned with a non-contributing building. It's more form, color.
In this particular building that we're dealing with, if it were contributing, if it were 10 years younger, we would want them to keep the lattice, because the lattice is a defining feature of that building. But in this case, it's not contributing. So can we ask them to keep lattice, which is a contributing architectural feature of that particular building? If they're just going to put up square columns, which are appropriate in a non-contributing building, is that really going to hurt the rest of the district? I think that's what we've got to consider. And that's difficult because it's going to impact that building, but I don't think it's going to impact the district.
I would be opposed to changing the time limits in the historic district. I think that introduces some
Well, we can't.
issues that I understand we can't,
that's a good
but
point.
just as a discussion point, who knows what that might bring up. But I have to wonder, in the case of this particular building, if in fact we were dealing with the historic district, this building was built in 1940,
Yeah, I believe it's 1940.
and the historic district existed in 1938, and they came in and wanted approval of this building with this lattice work. Would there not have been some contentious discussion about whether or not the lattice work was appropriate to the district as it then existed? I think there may have been.
Say that again?
Yeah, I'm not-
That the lattice work may not have been appropriate in terms of the original historic district. And now we're dealing with the fact that it's there, and it seems like it adds to it, certainly it adds a lot of interest. And I think maybe the problem is not so much that they must keep the lattice work as that they're not suggesting anything significant enough to be appropriate in the same context as the original building. I don't know if that's making myself clear, but
I missed that last part.
well, I'm not sure that the lattice work is such a major contribution to the district, start with that. And I'm not sure that we have the power to say you must keep the lattice work and repair it and restore it. And that in fact, if they were to propose something that was more acceptable to them and maybe much more acceptable than what they were proposing. I have a lot of problem with what they were proposing to replace it with. But there are a lot of other things that might work. And I don't have a problem going that direction. So the question of how we review non-contributing structures seems to me, you got to look at it in terms of what is it adding to the district, and is it appropriate? Was it appropriate when it was built? There are a lot of things done in the 40s and 50s that
My feeling is that there's non-conforming structures and there's non-conforming structures. Let's take Sedgwick. I mean, at the corner of Rugby and Wendell Terrace, I think there's that 70s built split level. I think that's the corner. And that was built in the 70s, and it's a split level house. It is, to me, non-conforming.
Agree.
And they've been in front of us. And I can remember years ago, I forgot what they wanted to do, but
Windows, I think.
we required a material that was different from what they proposed. And the basis upon that discussion was just that. I mean, we do talk about color, scale, and material. And that's the way we've always gone. Now, in this particular case, this is a non-conforming structure that is still contributing. Most people wouldn't drive by that building and not think it was, I mean, it's almost like an accident of birth of 6 or 7 years on the house, But you're right, would they have allowed that particular lattice work? And I agree, probably not. So I think that the decision in all cases has to come, and I like this sentence. The proposed alteration may not increase the incompatibility of the non-contributing element. I think that is
Positive statement about the
positive
district.
statement
Yes.
about the district and about how we make our decision.
We could go one step further. I do like this sentence. It gives you, but everything here is based on maintaining the character of the district. So even though it's non-conforming, they don't get a wild card to do anything they want. That's our
Correct.
goal.
Correct.
In fact, we want to reverse it to say that non-conforming buildings, whatever the situation, in any kind of an application, still needs to be supportive, support the character of the district. And that means that form, color, and texture can be commented on. You could pick a color that's more appropriate to the district and not let them do a color that's less appropriate to the district, like paint or whatever. And so you can make those comments in a positive way to support the district, even though it's non-conforming. So I think that's the only thing we would need to add is maybe this sentence, and to say that non-conforming applications will be considered for their impact on form, color, and material, so that you can.
So are we saying this? I'll put it this way, let's take this one property. That we're not, and I'm not trying to put words into people's mouth, I'm just going to say something. We're not necessarily opposed to them rebuilding this porch. We just want to make sure that it's rebuilt in a way that is not going to negatively impact the district.
Detract from the district, yeah.
Yeah, that's the right approach.
Still going to be pretty.
We can add that.
Wasn't the roof of the porch the main issue? I thought that was what we were really, that and the lattice, but
Yeah,
that
I mean,
sloped
you know,
metal.
Yeah, the whole.
To Cynthia's point, and it's counterpoint with Dan and Cynthia, would that lattice work have been appropriate at that period?
It was used in buildings that were built
yeah.
before.
Yeah, in
Oh,
fact,
no question of that.
in fact, it precedes, it goes to the lake,
Right.
East Lake styles.
East Lake
Where
style,
more
right,
design was.
right. And so, I think, taking the current application in front of us, what is the physical condition of that lattice work?
That's what,
Apparently, it's not good.
and we were gonna look at a site, we were gonna do a site visit just to back us up here, unless we don't want to.
But what I believe.
I mean,
he's
let's just say, for
proposing-
discussion's sake, it's not able to be saved.
Right.
And this was a contributing structure. And the rod is so bad, would we require an applicant to replicate that?
Probably, if it was a contributing element. It would be yes, we would consider that.
We'd consider it, and we would support it if somebody wanted to do it. But
We
if
would
somebody,
encourage it even.
we would encourage it. But would we require somebody to go to that length and replicate in wood that design?
It is possible.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not possible.
I know.
That's not the
We
question.
would definitely talk about it a lot.
We would have differences of opinion. We would definitely have differences of opinion.
So just.
I want it to stay, but the fact of the matter is, would we require it?
As a board member, I would like to say that privately, I reserve the right to express an opinion that isn't in line with guidelines.
Oh, sure you can. Sure you can. At the same time,
Even including the Secretary of the Interior.
Boy, he's pushing it.
I think every member has that right. You know, you have a reaction to a proposal, and, you know, you got an opinion.
right. The only, and I would agree with you 100%.
Really?
Yeah.
What about-
Yeah, to express the opinion, yet at the same time, the
What about
decision of the board must be made based on the guidelines.
But other board members could have the same opinion.
Right.
Sure.
So my understanding is with this particular application that he is he's not going to do that, the copper roof.
He is not?
He is not. He's planning on doing something probably with a hip roof that will be closer to the dormers with square posts. And perhaps a little bit of, that it has that arch.
Yeah, it does have an arch, yeah.
So I think that in the end, what will be presented will be something that is fairly pretty plain.
More appropriate to the building itself, I guess.
And appropriate to the district.
Well, yeah, there's no question about that, because he's trying to tone down the degree of difference that he's suggested previously by changing the roof form and addressing some character to the entrance. So we're going to see
that's the direction that he's going.
We're going to have a new application of the drawings.
Or a revised
application.
Yeah, a revised application.
So I think we have made progress.
Yeah, I think we made progress. I think this last sentence here,
can be included.
do we have the authority to include this in the guidelines?
It will be, so,
Can we amend the guidelines?
do you mean the ordinance? Or the guide, or our rules of procedure?
The Sedgwick guidelines.
Oh, Sedgwick guidelines. Oh, we can do that. We
I
can
would
certainly
think,
do that.
I would
But-
think that we ought to look at the non-conforming section and almost verbatim copy this.
Well, it's not
Well,
just,
I think
it's
what's-
not just Sedgwick guidelines, it would be.
Right, but start with the guidelines.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the main pieces, the ordinance is coming along. I mean, the whole zoning ordinance is coming along. But a major piece, and I would assume this will be happening over the winter, is pulling together the manual, the procedures manual.
Right.
For the entire zoning ordinance, but also, obviously
Specifically
for
this.
for our section. And I believe the city will be having a consultant helping us with that. And my recommendation would be to put something very similar to this in there. And it may even be worth just taking a look at the Ithaca's set of guidelines, because they're all illustrated like this, and it's really well laid out, and I think very user-friendly. And our guidelines are good too, but it may actually be worth looking over those again.
Right,
anyhow. It's been
right.
at least 10 years, because they were done before I arrived.
Yeah, well, just in this particular.
Okay, no.
In this particular case where you're talking about adding this sentence, I would go,
Yeah.
the second step that we were talking about
Yep.
was to say that non-contributing element and non-contributing properties will be reviewed for their impact on the district relative to form, material, and color.
Right.
Because we need to tell them that before they,
Right.
so they know that.
Which is what we just did
Right.
with the building on
that's
East
true.
Genesee Street.
Right.
That's exactly what we're doing.
And the reality is, the unspoken reality is that the level of incompatibility with the district that exists in a non-conforming structure is there. We cannot back it up.
Right.
We cannot say, oh, you're doing altering, so you gotta go, backwards, so to speak. And
I don't know what you mean. What do you mean? Example? Yeah.
it's a non-conforming structure.
Right.
They come in front of us for alteration.
They want to make it more non-conforming?
Right. Well, if they want to make it more non-conforming, then this last sentence comes into play.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if in fact, let's just say the non-conforming structure came in and said, I want to totally redo the skin of the building in exactly the same way,
Because
in
we're not-
exactly the same material
Okay.
as exists, I don't think we can say no.
I think you're right.
No.
Because that's replacing kind.
Fine. So,
Yeah.
that's
If they're
fine.
replacing in
I don't see
kind,
So they can do that.
Yeah.
I believe they can do it.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Oh, yeah, no, Lisa. go.
I might have missed this, but the period of significance cannot be changed.
No, we can't change that. No.
You could, but we don't intend to.
Well, we
We
can't
could-
change it. That's a national register.
Yeah, you're right.
That's
You'd have to
registered.
reapply.
But I'll say this,
So we
my
can,
guess is...
or it's difficult?
Pardon?
We can't do it, or it's difficult to do it, I guess.
It's a difficult process.
I don't know if you can. I've never heard of it being done, but that doesn't mean it hasn't been.
No, periods of significant, for example, when we redid the National Register nomination for North Salina Street and added a few blocks down Pearl and down North Salina
You
Street.
can add,
We actually changed the period of significance for the entire district.
did you really?
So wouldn't
So
that
that
be
actually
something,
grabs some additional buildings in.
wouldn't that be something that would, even if it's an effort that we need to, it might take some time, would eliminate this ambiguity that we're dealing with?
With some houses it would.
With some, it would
I
be
don't
some, I mean, I think it just
I think we
depends
need
on
some
how
more
far-
research.
How
And
far
there has
out
to be
you-
a justification as well.
However, I'll say this. When you talk about the National Secretary of Interior standards, and they say 50 years in part of the standards. That's a guideline. It's not cast in stone. And I almost, with this particular applicant, as I said, an accident of birth of 8 years or 7 years, when it's 80 years later, for a period of significance that was 60 years itself or 70 years itself, I'd almost be willing to argue that this is not a non-conforming structure.
Yeah,
I mean, part of me would say,
I agree with you.
yeah, this is not a non-conforming structure. This is a structure that was built within 6 or 7 years of the end date of the period, and it isn't, in fact, it is a conforming structure. And I think, I see what you say, Cynthia, I think a board like this, I'm not suggesting we do this, that'll open up a can of worms, but I think a board like this has the authority to say that.
We
do.
We could do that, but
We do.
it would require a public hearing and going through
Yeah.
common council. I mean, it would be the whole
I think we would
thing.
open up a real
Can of worms.
worms.
Yeah.
And when I looked at this building, I said, why is this non-conforming?
Right.
Because I thought it should be contributed.
It's because of its.
But it's age, right.
because of its age.
But we can't
Yeah.
summarily decide that something that has been considered non-contributing is now contributing. We'd have to go through the steps. And you can't start the steps after they come in front of you.
Right,
We should have
right.
started it
Right,
3 years ago. And,
right,
So why not start it now?
right.
Well, we could, but we've got so
start it
many
with
things
the-
we could start.
Yeah.
We could start with, we'll talk
Yes.
afterwards, yeah.
I just
All
have
right.
one other, can I just ask?
All right, anything else?
Just really quick.
Sure.
The gentleman that was here today presented that particular.
Yeah, Anthony
adjustment.
Rojas, yeah.
Now, regardless of what we say,
Excuse me for a second, guys.
can they go ahead and do exactly what they want to do, since that's not,
No,
It'll depend on what zoning and
right,
planning commission.
so,
okay,
so this is the process.
And they take into consideration what we say.
okay, all right, that's.
Right, so the process is that your comments rather go back to zoning. And the property owner, or the applicant, has the opportunity to address those comments, revise the plans, and resubmit the plans, and if they fit into what has been discussed or into the comments from any, it's not just the Landmark Preservation Board, DPW, police, fire, all the engineering, wherever the application has been sent out to, transportation, parking, that sort of thing. If the applicant agrees to revise according to those recommendations, it is an administrative review.
Right.
If for whatever reason the applicant cannot or doesn't want to, then it goes to the planning commission.
Right.
Planning commission does take into account, in fact, they need a supermajority vote to override a comment from the Landmark Preservation Board.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
I'll
why it's
also
really,
say
it's
that,
important that it's really clear what the comment is. Yeah.
yet at the same time, and maybe this language will help you, Lisa, the commenting responsibility we have has less strength, quote unquote, than a C of A.
See what has much more.
Okay,
Yes,
that makes sense
yes.
to me.
That's the
Okay.
big difference. And I
Did our
think,
comments make clear that if he wanted to rebuild what's existing, it would be okay? And just fix the deficiencies, the roof drainage and that stuff? Or haven't we
Yes,
really made
yeah.
the comment?
Which one are you talking
You're back
about?
to the,
current.
to
Oh, the
the,
current, the old
yes,
house.
yeah, no, he knows that.
He doesn't.
He does know that.
because that was one of the things we wanted a site visit for, because we thought we could fix the original roof structure and not have the whole additional roof on top. With a slope topper up the flash line, we were gonna try and make them aware of that possibility.
I would like to know, just curious, what the condition of the main porch structure is. My guess is it's pretty rotten.
Now switching back to that, to the general discussion that we just had about the way our recommendations are carried forward, this has been a big concern of mine over the years, because as you know, we get into some specific recommendations that are in a zone that are trying to help the project, but not necessarily a controlling factor from this board's point of view. I've been saying for a long time that there's not enough urban design guidelines. And this is what the new zoning's trying to get at, is to really articulate, form, and the new guidelines have this for the rezoned Syracuse and so on, have a lot of that in there, but that's what we need to keep doing. We need to have tighter relationship between the individual's applicants and our long-term goals in terms of urban design as well as contextual design.
You want me to say something?
Sorry.
No.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes,
Yes.
second by all.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.